So welcome. I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, Prescription for Your Transformation. Real people, real conversations, and real success. And one of the purposes of this platform is truly to discover new voices and new solutions for you. It is all about your personal transformation. How can you actually make that happen? And when we talk about transformation, there are so many different ways that that's indeed possible. And today is an exciting conversation that I'm going to have with an amazing human being that really gets to connect with you in a way that is very, very special. And it's special because it's in that space, that's that inner space within us. It's that essence within us. It's that spirituality, if you like that term, in describing our connection with everything around us. And so I'm delighted to be talking to Carole Forrest Lewitski today in regards to what she does as an awakening coach and working with compassion, energy, healing. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Bart, for having me.
So what's exciting for me is that, you and I have connected, before our interview in a very, very unique and special way, which I think is such an important element in the world around us that so many people don't really quite appreciate or, in fact, are even aware of. Because as energy beings, there's a way for our higher selves or spiritual essence to be connected with other people. And so just before the interview, we just had this connection, this resonance. So explain that, so any of the listeners hearing, what that process was and what it's all about.
So essentially what I've become used to doing prior to interviews like this, or certainly within the context of my coaching practice when I meet with clients, is that I ask at the beginning that my person, move out of the way, just be able to move aside so that I'm able to better connect with, I call it the higher levels of the other individual. So that would be the part of ourselves that is not living life through the filters, but the part of us that just understands and knows what's important and also has clarity on our own journey and what best direction to take. So I ask that my higher levels connect with that other individual's higher levels. And so that when there's an exchange, we are then able to come from a place of inspiration. And with the people I work with, what that creates is this real ability to work in partnership and for me to be able to shed light on areas that they are maybe feeling stuck or challenged or feeling like even at the depths of despair. And I'm able to, through that way of addressing our session together, able to bring clarity, and they're able to find their answers more easily. They're able to find solutions. They're able to recognize what action is needed to be taken so that they can be able to break free from whatever they're going through, if it's anxiety, if it's worry. That certainly is a very common thread as of late, especially. And so to be able to bring a sense of peace and understanding that everything that is happening in our life is happening for us, and that's going to look different for each individual. We get to commune and have this exchange between each other during that very powerful hour that is just completely done in a manner that brings the answers to what they're seeking. And so it's something that now I can't skip that step. And that's why even I asked with you for today that our higher levels be able to connect so that during this time, whatever gets shared between us is exactly what the listeners are asking to hear and what would serve best for them on their journey. So
that's a beautiful way of describing it, because for my own personal history, which is quite interesting, I grew up in 5 different countries, saw a lot of different spiritual practices, but also came, from a very scientific background. And it was just interesting how oftentimes there was a conflict between that spirituality, that Eastern philosophy, if we will, or the essence of being, or just the beingness of our human experience that is just completely unexplainable. And we don't really even need to explain it. It's rather, let's just be human. Let's just have that experience. But because, we live in a world of technology and science, and, there's all these rules and conditions and obligations, it just seems that so many people are caught up in this more cerebral space up in the head of logic and details and data, that they have a hard time connecting with their inner self. And that's what's exciting, I think, about someone like yourself, who's very much focused on taking somebody on that journey where they can discover their inner self and find that the beauty of that inner self, the essence of that inner self, and realize this is their gift, rather than, and you said something, and I'd like you to expand on this, is that sometimes people are so focused on one of two things: either behaving in a way so that other people will love them, because their biggest fear is that we're rejected, or quite simply, taking on somebody else's persona or behavioral traits so that they can become like them, and neither one of them is their true essence.
Right.
So expand on that.
Yeah, you bring up a couple of really good points, because even when you speak of the innocence and the true essence, I always relate that back to being a child, because when we are children, at some point, we know that all is well. We know that we're being taken care of. We don't question with the what ifs. What if this happened? What if that happens? There's just this pure knowing that all is well and that we're being taken care of. And so that allows the child to really be in the present moment. And so just as recently, a couple of weeks back, I was doing a workshop and I talked about that, how getting back to that child within us that knows how to be present, because it wasn't coming from a place of strategizing and trying to plan ahead and trying to protect or trying to use the rational mind, because the rational mind cannot put in a box what love is, cannot put in a box what the connection we have as human beings is. That cannot be defined with logical terms. And so to be able to go back to that place, the child within us that knows that all is well, from that space, there can't be anxiety, there can't be worry, there can't be trying to be someone that we're not, because that child knows that he or she is perfect exactly as he or she is, that God or Creator would never fabricate anyone, would never as a mistake. None of us are a mistake. And so coming from that place, there's a real ability to recognize that anything that is not that is either an identity that we've taken on, or like you mentioned, trying to be someone because we think society will accept us more, or that our partner will love us more if we act this way or that way. And so all those things pull us away from our true authentic self. And in the work that I do is really about like identifying those differences and seeing when does it serve to put on the hat of that role. I mean, I'm a mother myself, so yes, there's a purpose and it serves to be a mother when I'm a mother. But when I'm in a different space where I'm with my client, only my client exists, nothing else exists in that moment. So there's no room for me to be carrying or worrying about what's going on outside of that moment. All that exists is me and that individual right in front of me. And so if we can step into every moment of our life in that way, then it looks a lot more different than turning on the news and letting our mind just really take a hold of us and go into panic and worry and anxiety about things that are not right in front of us, that we don't have control over changing. And sometimes we do, but in general, a lot of the worry and anxiety comes from all the stories we make up in our head as to how things might play out, when in fact, does it ever play out that way? And are we not always equipped to handle everything that comes our way with precision? We are given what we need. We are fully supported always for every challenge that may show up for us, but only in that moment. And that's one of the areas that I personally worked a lot on, because it could take me up to 2 hours to fall asleep at night at one point in my life, because I would just go through the plethora, like the list of reasons why I should be worried. And I have a big family, and so I had plenty of reason to be worrying, not only for my children right now, but for how they might be in society when they grow up and as teenagers. And oh my goodness, this could happen, that could happen. And really recognizing that we are always being given exactly what we need for what comes our way in that moment, not 10 years ahead of time, not 1 week ahead of time. And so that's probably one of the most satisfying parts of the work that I do with people, is just seeing the freedom that shows up in their life when they recognize how much of a jail they created inside their own minds, and that it doesn't need to be that way.
Wow, that's impressive. Because one of the things that I really focus on in this platform and my radio show is tapping into your authentic genius. Einstein said, there's all geniuses all around us. Everybody's a genius in their own way. And, how unfortunate is it when, as an individual, you don't get to discover that part within you? And there's so many reasons why that doesn't happen in the world, particularly because there's so many people criticizing you. And the last thing that we want in our own personal life is to be rejected. We want to be part of community. We want to be part of others. And when we learn the only way to do that is to abide by other people's rules or expectations and not really be ourselves. And what I discovered, fortunately, is that through this personal development work, and is that I could find that inner child inside of myself. And that was very liberating, because you're spot on, with many children, and not everyone has a great experience, and that's unfortunate. No. And yet in those bad experiences, children have this capability of seeing things still in a different light, in a positive light, in a more optimistic light, for a lot of different reasons, which we won't go into. But the truth is that you're right. That's where we find most of our freedom, where everything will be okay. And so I have a question for you. And this is a question I've asked many, many people over the years, because I agree with you 100%. So if there's one age, from the day that you're born to, say, the age of 16, right? If you could only pick one age to be at right now or in life, what age would that be?
5 comes to mind right away.
5, okay. You see, I that's interesting, because a lot of people will choose an older age, like a teens. For me, it was 8, and understanding a little bit of the psychological development of children. It's usually by the age of 7 or 8 that we've kind of gone through the major development stages in psychology. But it's also that stage where you're still dreaming about life. Life is great, life is big, life is magnanimous, but you're also at an age where you're also becoming a lot more independent. You see, a 5-year-old will have a hard time leaving the house because he's still kind of scared to leave, the safety of the home. But an 8-year-old typically is a lot more precocious and will take more chances. And so I always thought the age of 8 was that age where you've got the freedom, you've got the confidence to go out there and and explore the world, but you're still in that kind of fantastical phase where, everything is just amazing and great, and you're not affected by judgment.
Yeah, and I think 5 just popped up because by that age I really had my voice and I wanted to be heard.
There
And
you
I
go.
could be heard. And I think in our family setting there was more freedom around because we grew up on a dairy farm. So by 5 I was quite independent already and going off and doing my own thing and hanging out with the cats and the dogs and just being able to feel like being one with nature. And
Right.
there's something to be said about that too, because when we're finding that inner child, it's really important to tap into that part of us that brings out that creativity or that imagination or that essence of what's not related to the mind, but is really related to what's at the heart of who we are, and what brings us back to that place where we could just be so carefree and sing and dance and not be bothered by what anybody thinks of us. And you talked earlier about the criticism that can come from others, but what I've found to be true from my own experience and from working with others is the biggest bully of all is our own criticism of self. And until we really stop and recognize the voices that show up in our head and start separating what is coming from love and what isn't, true compassion for self cannot be found. And if we don't have compassion for ourselves, then there's just not an ability to fully show up as who we are. And so that I found to be an interesting part of my own experience is what I had come to normalize, the dialogue that was going on in my head. At one point, I asked myself, if you spoke that way to someone else, like, you should be probably put in jail for that or something. Or it would be abuse. If it was towards a child, that would be abuse. Just the type of conversations that would show up as I wasn't good enough, I wasn't doing it well enough. And it's almost like I would throw myself into such a deep pit of shame to make sure I wouldn't repeat that behavior, that I would improve, or those thoughts, or however it showed up. And that's an epidemic. That is more common than not in all of
that does a complete reframe for me, because I have never thought of it that way. To imagine myself, criticizing somebody else the way that I criticize myself. And you're absolutely right. I would never do that. And very interesting. And it's also interesting, though, is that whatever unspoken word there is within our head about someone else, I can guarantee you they're feeling it. You and I know that there's an energy transfer with your thoughts to other people. And when you're actually critical of somebody else, guess what? They're going to know it, even though you don't say the words. Most importantly, though, I like what you just said when it's about, being aware of how tough are you on yourself that you wouldn't even begin to imagine doing it to anybody else.
Well, and I'm going to share something that even takes that to the next level, because I started my role as a mom with a very clear intention that if my kids would make mistakes, like screw up, spill the milk, whatever the case may be, I would make sure that they knew that that was okay, that they could make mistakes and that's just part of life and I still love them, so on and so forth. And I committed to doing that. I was very committed to doing that. And on they would show up as human beings and spill the milk or however that would show up. And at one point I noticed that they were growing into this habit of being defensive, scared, wanting to hide their mistake. And I was completely shocked and puzzled, because I thought, how is it that I consistently have reminded them that I still love them, that it's okay, that it's normal? And then one day that light bulb switched on. They had been observing how I was treating myself when I made mistakes. And that was actually more impactful on them than how I was treating them. they recognized the inner dialogue that was happening. Like you talk about how the other person can feel energetically if you're criticizing them and judging them. Absolutely. But even more than that, people around you can feel, not just children, but everyone around us can feel if we're being critical and hard on ourselves. And it somehow in a weird kind of way, it like gives the message to others that they should do that themselves to themselves, or they can't give themselves permission, certainly not around you, to ever make mistakes. So that was a very powerful moment.
So what did you do differently after that? I'm sure you changed.
Well, I shifted my perspective on myself because I realized that I was hurting them in the way I had been trying to avoid hurting them all along. And so it's interesting, I did it for them, but in the end, it's of course a gift to myself. But it's just a lifetime of a well-practiced habit, even if it's dysfunctional, it's what we know best. And so I retrained myself when I would catch myself making critical comments. I would say, is that how a child of God deserves to be talked to? And the answer is always no, that if we're doing our best in every moment, we are doing the best we can. And sometimes that looks clumsy, and sometimes that's not that great. And other times it's brilliant and amazing. But even on the days that are clumsy and not that great, and I say that to mothers in particular, but it applies to everybody, there's so much at play, there's so much going on beyond what we even see about our own life. Lack of sleep, hormones, oh my goodness, the full moon, however, whatever we want to just attribute, there's so many things going on that contribute to how we show up every day. As long as we're constantly just doing the best we can, that sometimes our worst days are the ones that we should feel the most victorious about, because those days had the most obstacles to get through, to actually get to the end and say, wow, like I got through today. And so every day we should have that conversation with ourselves at the end of it. Like, I got through today, and high five ourselves and give ourselves a pat on the back. And just by doing that, it frees everyone else to start doing the same. It's amazing, like the ripple effect of what we experience towards ourselves, the relationship we start having with ourselves, and how it impacts everyone else in our life. It's a gift we don't just give ourselves, it's a gift we give everyone.
You're absolutely right, and it's that relationship with self that's so critical. And remember, and a reframe I invite you to think of, and anyone else, is that all the self-criticism that we have for ourselves is really an extension from somebody else's criticism view at some point of your life, and not by any malicious intent, but just simply, people were working based on their model of the world or their rules that they learned beforehand. And no one has ever really taught us, how to be human. And it's an interesting experience, this being human. Mm-hmm. And I would say it's also very hard, this being human. And giving yourself permission to have faults and weaknesses, giving yourself permission to be wrong, giving yourself permission to have these, feelings, whatever feelings that they are, is perfectly okay. And just simply an opportunity without judgment to then say, okay, where's the gift in all this? What is it that I can change in my life? What is it that I can now do differently? Simply because I'm experiencing something that I call a disturbance inside of myself.
Right.
And in my opinion, disturbance is a completely neutral experience. It's an irregularity. It's a disturbance. It's something out of balance that you don't desire to have. Mm-hmm. And my belief is, and from the learnings that I've gotten from Eva Purakis and the path work and people like that, is that we all desire divine happiness. I mean, all of us do. I mean, let's face it. Let's be honest with ourselves. That's what we really want in life. Mm-hmm. However that manifests itself is going to be very different. However, people have their own purpose and mission. But the truth is, for that divine happiness to actually happen, there's only one route to that, and that is you have to resolve whatever makes you unhappy. I mean, think about it. If you resolve whatever makes you unhappy, what's left? It's happiness. And that's an interesting part of my life today, is that, I've been very mindful and thoughtful about my whole life, looking at strategizing my future, but strategizing my future in a way that made sense, that was actually in alignment with myself, even though that I didn't know it at the time, because I'm finding myself in a place very much in alignment, doing what I love to do all the time. I'm not doing all the things that I like to do because there's just not enough time during the day. And so sometimes I feel a little off because I'm not getting to where I want to go fast enough, because the things I want to do are just absolutely awesome. But the truth is the key question that I keep on asking myself is, what is it that I really want? In any moment of discomfort, in any moment of irregularity or disturbance, I'm asking myself, what is it that I really want right now? And honoring that space within me to say, okay, let's take care of that. And not at anybody else's expense, but it's really what I call self-actualization. If you said earlier on, life happens for us, not to us. What that really means is that you're taking responsibility, and we talked about that earlier on in a way, is that you just have to take responsibility for who you are, and honor that without that judgment, and say, okay, right, so this is who I am. All right, let me make the best of what I have. And I believe that, and this is a learning from the world of neurolinguistic programming, where people do the best they can with the resources that they have. Mm-hmm. That's it. I mean, you can't do any better than that. I mean, you could be totally unresourceful and get nothing done. That's different. But the other part is that there's that belief, and I believe this, that everything that we do is motivated by positive intent. And that could be bad behavior. I mean, it could be bad things that you do, but somewhere deep inside, it's motivated by a positive intent based on what you've learned since you're a child. And so that's why it's beautiful, the work that you get to do, is that you get to help people awaken, find their inner child, find their true essence, their true beingness, finding that gem of love for self, so that, as you put it, everything else kind of falls away. Right. And what a wonderful place that you get to help people to arrive at.
Yeah, it's something I feel completely honored and humbled by, because to be a witness of such deep vulnerability, but to be gifted with the opportunity of creating a space where people can go down into that journey for themselves and find on the other side freedom, and find on the other side happiness, like you talk about. And I want to qualify that happiness doesn't mean that you never experience pain again. But pain and every emotion that exists because we came here to experience them all. But we can experience all of that without being a victim of it. And that's the part that defines it as freedom. We then get to realize that we are creating our own life, and we are responsible for our perception of it. And it's certainly, it's a process, and one that requires a lot of grace and patience, and not with the intention of having a destination to get to, because there really isn't. It's just the only destination that exists is right now. And what does this look like? And like you said, what do I want? And what is there to do? What action is there to take? And grace, continuing having grace, like compassion for the entire experience and our entire journey. And recognizing when people show up in our life that are instrumental in shining the light to get to that place within us. I've had unbelievable people show up in my own life throughout. I would be lying if I would say that there wasn't always consistently from day one someone that represented that remembering. And maybe to the degree that I forgot myself is to is perhaps why I ended up having as many children as I did, because they serve as a reminder of that innocence and that purity that we all have access to inside of all of us. And I even tell people that don't have children, I just say, go find a nephew or niece or a neighbor. Like, just children are just such a light and a reminder of that innocence, of that creativity, of that carefree spirit. And when we can tap into that, it's not only freedom, it's not only happiness, but it's like, to me, it's eternal youth as well, like that we can get access to right until we're done our journey here. So it's...
No, you remind me of a story, of an experience, if you will. I was traveling through Europe, and I was in Spain, and I must have been about 17 years old, and still in that place, where I get to dream, and I'm idealistic, and also in that place where anything is possible. And I was absolutely fascinated. I was at this country club in Madrid, and everybody was out there by the pool, families having a great time. And I remember this little boy, and he must have been about 3 years old. And the way that he was standing, with his little pot belly, standing straight up and looking at the world around him as if, this is my kingdom. This is my kingdom, and this is mine. This is my life. Everything belongs to me. And that omnipotence that he exuded in that very moment, was just absolutely magical and beautiful. And it's the freedom, of just being yourself and seeing the life in the world around you just the way that you are choosing to do that. And that was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I think we all get to deserve to have those kinds of experiences. And, when people like yourself are able to guide, others in this difficult journey, because it is a journey. It's a scary journey. It's vulnerability. It requires courage, but it requires support and trust and all these different things. But the journey, as hard as it is absolutely worth it, because when you get to shed all these things that really don't serve you, that just simply bog you down, get you stuck in the mud, just confuse you or misdirect you, and only because of the things that you've learned over time through all the different experiences that you've had, good ones or bad ones. Truth is that your worst experiences can become your best, but it's a choice. And we have to start choosing that if we want to get that freedom. And what I'm excited about is that there are more and more people like yourself. And this is also the purpose of my platform, to bring people to this platform so that others can find you, so that you can guide them and change their life and see, help them see what's really possible for them. So I'm really grateful for you today for going so deep, and I'm enthralled by what you shared with us, and I hope, listeners were as well. So I really want to thank you for that. And before we go, I have two questions for you.
Yes.
One pertains to this upcoming trip of yours, which we're going on to New Zealand. And what are some of your thoughts about that? And my other question I'll ask after you answer this one.
Yeah, my thoughts around that is just absolute gratitude, because I had initially heard an interview a good almost year and a half ago where Sprite Loriano was being interviewed, and my heart just lit up, because there's just something in her voice and then something in her message of philanthropy, that she brings water filters to parts of the world that don't have clean drinking water. And missionary work has been something I've been passionate about since I was a little girl. So that really lit up that child in me, I suppose. I always have had such a love and desire of diving deeper into that. As my children get older, I also want them to be involved in things like that. And so that was my initial draw. I hear things sometimes, so I heard a yes for this trip. I knew nothing more about it except that Sprite was part of organizing it. But as things unfolded and more information came through, I understood what was involved on another levels. There's a few different aspects of this trip. One is sharing our message and being able to collaborate and work with other world changers and leaders of awakening, I suppose, in everybody in their own way. And so I'm very much looking forward to connecting with the group of people I'm traveling with. But I've come to see that when things like this show up for me, it's really important that I ask my mind to move out of the way and just allow my heart to lead, and to just show up as who I came here to be. And so not necessarily understanding the full context when I said yes. As soon as I said yes, the journey began for me, because for me, it's not when I get on the airplane that the trip actually begins. It's the second I say yes to it. And so it's been a good year of personal transformation and growth and facing my own fears. I mean, this is what I teach. This is what I pass on to people that work with me, is how fears can prevent us from fully showing up. And so it has pushed me to the limit already before I have even left for this journey. And I am just so excited. We are speaking in front of a group of people, and then we'll be doing a workshop the next day. And my topic is all about moving from judgment to compassion, because that's really what I feel very passionate about. I feel that is what changes the world, is when we can experience compassion for ourselves, compassion for others, and compassion for our life circumstances, and remove any judgment that can show up. And so it's kind of led up to this. I did some work with Jennifer Huff for the last 3 years, and then through a program of flight school, it was my own asking, show me where I still hold judgment for others and for life circumstances. And what I was surprised to see through that full year of intensive work that we did was that the most prevalent, most in my face judgments that would come up was all towards myself, and how I had just not seen it. So now I get to pay it forward, and I get to just share that part of it. And yeah, there's a ton of other stuff going on that trip, but yeah, I'm still a yes to it. And I just am open to it being however it will show up for me, and not having preconceived ideas of how I would want it to be, just asking to be shown how this can continue to serve myself on my journey, and then bring that back to others.
Nice. And that's what this will do exactly. And, I'm blessed because this is my third trip, second trip with Sprite. So it's Live Your List Productions and Sprite Loriano Global, for anybody who's listening in. And what's wonderful about it is that this is a group of messengers, 30 plus messengers, transformational leaders from all different backgrounds, really coming together and finding new perspectives and new opportunities to serve our higher selves and serve from our higher self to the rest of the world, and providing very constructive and what I rather call generative energy into the world around us. There's a responsibility for people like ourselves to help raise the vibration of the world, bring more alignments and oneness, if you will. And that's what this, one of the purposes of this is. And also the purpose of my platform is really to tap into that, what I call the collective wisdom of people like yourself and others, and really come to a space of generative collaboration where we can just work together without that judgment and find ways to, help everyone and ourselves at the same time. And so that's exactly what's going to happen. We're going to New Zealand. We're going to go to South Island. We're going to visit one of the indigenous tribes, the Waitaha, and with some, well-needed water filtration systems. An absolute brilliant thing that Sprite Loriano is doing with Sprite Loriano Global and the Water Bearers. We're bringing water filters throughout the world, especially I think it's called the Women's Water Bearers. And so beautiful woman she is, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be working with her as well, and you're going to have that as well. So Looking forward to an incredible trip, an adventure with you, transformative. And you're right, it's already started. It has started for me as well. And so one last question for you is that, how do people find you? What's the best way for people to connect with you if they want you as their awakening coach and helping them with their compassion and energy healing?
Absolutely. Yes, I can be contacted through Facebook with the Facebook extension expandingforward.com. And also my webpage is www.expandingforward.com. And if people sign up, I do a monthly newsletter, which is just more inspiration and kind of encouragement to people, all about the topics we talked about today. And it's my absolute pleasure to just be able to even have a free session is usually what I give people initially, just to get a taste if we're an energetic match and if we're ready to be in partnership together and go from there. So certainly that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Well, anybody listening, it would be an absolute gem of an experience if you connect or when you connect Carole, because we all need people like you in our life so that we can make the changes. We don't always have the answers. We certainly actually don't have all the answers. And so helping, with the help with your guidance is always incredibly beneficial. So again, I want to thank you for today. And any last words you'd like to share?
I am just grateful for today. I'm grateful for the listeners, and for everyone that shows up in my life is seen as an absolute gem. And I don't believe in coincidences. I don't believe in any of that. I feel that connection and being real with each other is what makes this world a better place. So let's just continue doing that. Onward and forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Carole. And I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, Prescription for Your Transformation. Real people, real conversations, real success. Talking both on Facebook Live as well as Radio Star Worldwide once a week. It's at 7 p.m. Eastern. And really tapping into that collective wisdom and creating that space of generative collaboration, tapping into your authentic genius and living the life that you desire. Carole, thank you so much. And I will be back tomorrow. So thank you.
Okay.